So I just realised that I've only ever done a single video on Fable 1, and I felt like that needed to change ASAP. So we're heading back to Albion to find out, can you beat Fable with the stick? The idea for today's video is most certainly not original. I know for a fact many people have tried this before, and I also saw it mentioned multiple times in the comments section of my Fable 1 Level 1 video. But it's something I've always wanted to try, plus I tend to play through the original Fable at least once a year anyway, so making a video out of it is like killing two birds with one stone. Not to jump the gun a bit here, but I'm going to need to supplement the build with magic at some point. Now, that's not me saying that I'm just going to be casting fireballs. That would 100% be against the spirit of the run. No, what I actually mean by this is that I will need to make use of magic buffs like slow time, multi-strike, and possibly berserk if I want to get past certain scenarios. Does it go against the idea of the run? Yeah, maybe a little bit, but at the end of the day, the only weapon I will be using is this stick, and I think you will understand the use for the magic, especially in the later parts of the run. Now, with all that out of the way, let's begin. Like always, life begins as a goblin-faced child boy intent with getting as many coins out of his neighbours as physically possible. As there is nothing much for me to do here, and I don't exactly feel like beating up the local bully this time around, I just play my cards right by getting 2 coins right off the bat, by agreeing to, and then betraying the trust of Mr. Unfaithful, and then leaving my character to be a lemon while I go and make a drink.
Are you just gonna stand there like a lemon?
With 3 gold coins at the ready, I trade them for a box of chocolates, which will then set off the events of the entire franchise. Returning home, we find that Dad's been killed. Shame. And then after that, within no time at all, the only announcer in Great Britain recruits us into his PMC, and just like that, it's time to get to work. Before being trusted with our beating stick, we need to pummel away with our fists on this dummy. Now, you could go to the comments and immediately type "run field," but I would argue we all saw this coming from a mile away. Besides, if we're all seemingly willing to look past Fallout 3's mandatory roach murder, then I believe we can just say that the run only truly begins in Fable once I crawl my way out of the guild. Anyway, we get the stick, get our first kill as the dummy does drop an experience orb implying it was alive, and then agree to help clear out the beetles in the nearby woods with our new WMD. That stands for Wooden Manufactured Death Stick if you're curious. Despite having an alarm at the ready for freaking beetles coming within the vicinity of perhaps the most well-guarded place in all of Albion, it takes the small child no time at all to bludgeon them back into the dirt. With that, we can jump through puberty and make it to the final stages of the tutorial. Also, fun fact, I think, here's an odd glitch that happens quite frequently in the menus when playing Fable Anniversary on the Series X. I have no clue what causes this, but the game did get an FPS update to run at 60, plus it loads much faster than it did in the 360, so maybe it has something to do with one of those. Either way, it's not a big deal as I can read, and therefore, I know what I'm looking at in my inventory. Anyway, on to combat training.
You can put that old stick away.
Sadly, you do have to hit Whisper with the sword, as doing so with the stick doesn't count for whatever reason. Again, tutorial, so neither does this. This is the only part where you need to use the sword, as practicing defense and the actual fight allow you to progress with the stick. I humiliate her, twice as a matter of fact, and then move on to practicing archery, along with becoming a Sith Lord. Another brief time skip, and it's time for the final trial with Maze. Naturally, the stick doesn't count because Maze hates fun, so it's back to the sword ever so briefly before I finish up my final test. I am now thrust into the wide open world. As you might expect, I spend my first bunch of experience on upping my melee damage with Physique. Oh, you thought I was going to dive right into multi-strike and slow time? No, truth be told, I didn't even consider using magic until I got to Nothal Glade. So for the first 2 hours, it's strictly stick only. For those that don't know, the stick has a base damage of 20, the lowest in the game outside of your bare fists as far as I can remember, and that damage only slightly improves with every level of Physique. If you're ever curious, the amount of damage I deal per swing will show up in the bottom right hand corner of the screen every time I manage to bonk something or someone. I named myself Druid, not to capitalise on the recent Baldur's Gate 3 news, but rather because I thought it was fitting as nature and sticks and all that. This then leads into my first proper fight with the Wasp Queen. The normal Wasps are all one-shots, thank God, whereas their Queen can take a little more punishment, although admittedly not that much. Despite the Guildmaster continuously mentioning that the bow would be your best option, standing underneath the Wasp and whacking away at her gets results just as, if not faster. Before long, I can add another notch to my stick, and then head on over to Barstone, where I encounter my one and only weakness in this entire game. I know it's not the fastest way to make money, but to me it is by far the most fun, and as such, this is where I spent the next 30 minutes of my time. Unlike the level 1 run, I obviously cannot buy better weapons. I can, however, use the money to become overly edgy only 1 hour in. This is the Aeon armor set combined with some parts of the armored leather, as well as chainmail. The Aeon and armored leather are from DLC packs I genuinely forgot that I had. Not to worry, while they may provide decent protection, they are still priced accordingly, so they are no more broken than say grinding out money to buy plate mail. Something that, if you recall, I did right away in the last run. I could easily have gambled until I had the money for the full set, but I wanted to play the actual game. Shocking, I know. So that's why I settled for the helmet, along with other less than stellar armor. I mean, I say that, but it's still miles better than what the game would normally expect you to be rocking by this stage. Armoured up, I returned to the guild, pump more iron, and then set off to help out the guards at Orchard Farm. I was a little concerned about how killing my first bandit would go, but luckily I came across one on the way there, and as a result, got to see what I would be dealing with. Honestly, it wasn't that bad. Sure, it takes a few more swings than I'm normally used to, but it's not awful. At least not yet. Let's not pretend like we still aren't in the opening hours. To make things a bit easier, during the defense of the boxes at the farm, I am backed up by 2 guards, who certainly help to take the heat off of me and allow me to focus the bandits down one at a time. A strategy that you'll see employed from here until the very end of the run is maneuvering around to an enemy's back and then attacking them repeatedly, as this stun locks most people, sometimes indefinitely. One person this won't work on, however, is Whisper, who coincidentally is the very next fight. This mainly serves as flourish practice, so not a whole lot to go over. Simply put, sticks and stones did indeed break her bones. I suppose you could count that as still the tutorial to a degree, seeing how it's still trying to teach you new things, but regardless, now it was time to get the ball rolling with everyone's favourite quest, the Darkwood Trader Escort. There is no way in hell I am saving Trader number 3 from becoming a balverine, considering just how long it's going to take to kill everything in these woods. Granted, I do bring him along though. After all, it's another meat shield, which helps to keep the swarm of bandits off of me. On the topic of balverines, I just try to avoid them where I can. Simply because they already take reduced damage from anything without a silver augment, meaning my weak ass stick, instead of doing at least 20 damage, will instead do a max of 8. I could definitely kill them, but the time investment isn't really worthwhile for how little experience I'll get in return, so if they are optional, they will be avoided. Avoiding them is easy enough. As for the bandits in the next area over, well, my plan works to perfection. They are far more interested in the traders than me, and as a result, I can clobber them with little problems. The traders are a little worse for wear afterwards, and that could have come back to bite me, but I'm not going to pretend like I haven't played through this game many times before. I know for a fact that the traders' rest site is up next, meaning they will be back to full health, and in no time, ready for their next stabbing. There's only a few bandits in the next area, as well as some hobs to mix things up just a little bit. While fighting the hobs, number 3 loses his business sense and finally turns. Like the others before him, I say nuts to that and just let him live out a peaceful life in the forest while me and the others hurry on to the troll. Trolls are some of the easiest enemies in this entire run, simply due to being able to knock the boulders right back at them, a trick that I just assumed was well known, but according to last time, this was some brand new knowledge for a lot of people. So hopefully this video also shares this info with some new people so they can blitz through their next troll encounter with ease. Once the troll is dead, the quest is complete, and we can return to Oakvale, which is a lot colder than it was during our last visit. We don't spend too long here as we immediately run off in the direction of Twinblade's bandit camp, which, conveniently, can be accessed from the beach. No wonder they were able to burn the town down so easily before. This also means it's time for the one and only mandatory stealth section in the entire game. Actually, scratch that. The only mandatory stealth section in the entire franchise. This isn't like Rising, sadly. I cannot just silently impale them with a wooden stick and be on my way. Rather, I do need to try and sneak past them with this game's, admittedly, terrible and bare-bones stealth mechanics. Naturally, I am caught. A few times. To be fair, killing off the bandits this way just allows me to hide behind these rocks that are close to the gate, and once they walk past, I can just run on through. Even though all I need in the next area is the bandit gear, I still made a point to take every last one of them out for some reason. We're in luck though, they're all still relatively weak. Honestly thought they'd be a bit tougher by this stage. The cool thing about the bandits is that you can physically see when they get tougher. Just like when you get stronger, they start to get more muscular. It's not really important, but I've always thought it was a nice touch. Arriving in the low tier camp, I have a few options on how to get the pass to get through. Thing is, you are a fool if you don't just kill the game master for his, as it is by far the quickest and most simple solution. Sure, I could pay for it I suppose, but I like my money where it is, thank you. I use a similar strategy in the elite camp where I just bludgeon the slaver bandit to the point where he stops twitching, and then can use his key to free the women, who most definitely get recaptured. Doesn't matter to me as it serves as a distraction just long enough for me to come face to face with Twinblade. Considering this is the first proper boss fight, I won't throw too much shade his way, but even with the stick, this was a cakewalk. I suppose, to be fair, what weapon I use doesn't really change how difficult or simple the fight is, rather just how long it will take. Every time he plants his sword into the ground and I can hit him in his back tattoo, I'm able to land 2 blows, which combined do a whopping 114 damage. FYI, that's horrendous, but it does work. It's weird, this whole fight feels like it takes an eternity, but looking at my footage, it only lasted 5 minutes. I know that doesn't sound that long, and it really isn't, but let's be real, by this stage most of us have probably already got master, or at the very least obsidian weapons, seeing how easy it is to get the money for them. Meaning, this fight is usually over with in less than 2 minutes. Anyway, I eventually get him down to about a quarter, which ends the fight and begins a cutscene, which I skip. Killing him would be hilarious, but I really didn't feel like fighting all of those bandits at once, so I went with the heroic option and spared him instead. All you lose out on this way is a potential boast and some experience, so nothing worth losing any sleep over really. It's off to Northhold Glade now, always a fun time, but at least the first enemy we come across is a rock troll, which, other than seemingly random triple rock throws, is just as easy to take down as the one in Darkwood. Our first quest here is to find the Archaeologist, which is as simple as knowing how to spell the word hits. Short and sweet, but not to worry, we will be seeing him very soon. I am getting ahead of myself, next up was the White Balverine mission, and this is where I began to strengthen my build with support magic. It was now mandatory to fight Balverines. Funny enough, you cannot slay the White Balverine passively, so being able to slow down time and position myself would make fighting them just a little bit less stressful. I ended up not really needing it for the first group you have to kill near the village. They were much more preoccupied with the tasty villagers, allowing me to swoop in from behind and combo them non-stop by getting them stuck in between me and the wall. After the last one goes down, it's a little run-around segment where you have to learn about the lore of the White Balverine. It's not about damage here, rather just how many hits you can land, so no troubles at all. The troubles only begin when I drive it from town and have to fight it for real. So, as you might expect, the White Balverine has a lot more health than a regular variant, as well as more defense. As you can see, each swing does 6 damage. No way around this, I am going to be here for a hot minute. Oddly enough, something that I noticed that makes this a little less annoying than fighting a normal Balverine is that he doesn't block or jump off camera. In other words, if I can find a way to get him stun locked, or at least in some kind of loop, I should be good to go. Sure enough, I'm able to do both at different times during the fight. If you attack the Balverine head on, you can get 3, maybe 4 swings in before he will counterattack. Once I noticed this, it became as simple as throwing out 3 hits, holding block to prepare for a counterattack, block set attack, and then rinse and repeat. There is also the strategy of getting behind him, and due to him not being able to block, you can just attack him indefinitely as he is powerless to do anything. Or at least he would be if it wasn't a boss fight. After lowering his health to certain intervals, he will stop the fight, howl, and call in reinforcements. Not only does this kill my flow, but it momentarily throws my previous plan out the window until I can deal with the reinforcements. Granted, it's not that big a deal, it's just more time consuming on top of a fight that's already quite the slog. You know what, that's probably the best word to describe the run from this point onwards. It becomes a slog as enemies begin to get more health, and the game starts throwing more of them at you at a single time. Now to be fair, this was something I suspected going in. Far too late into the fight, I realised that if I just kept up the offensive on the White Balverine, I didn't really have to worry about the others. Once I learnt this, I took the dog for a walk down the path until he was far too tuckered out to keep going. That's honestly some incredibly valuable information right there that would no doubt help me out a ton in the arena, which, coincidentally, is the very next quest. Like before, I'm going to go through this by rounds just to give you an idea, because in the grand scheme of things, there isn't a whole lot to talk about, which is crazy when you realise the entire thing took me 66 minutes. Round 1 is Wasps. Even with the stick, this is a joke and still a strange round to start things off. Round 2, Hobs, very easy to combo, and other than the ones with magic, I never really saw them push the offensive or try to help out their allies when I had them in said combos. Also, this might be the first time ever when the traps in the arena were actually more of a help than a hindrance. This was very evident in round 3 with the Balverines. Also, Whisper, for the first time in her life, is actually worth a damn, as she can certainly output more damage than me. Best part about that is she tends to take the attention of everything in the arena, while I find and pick one who is separated from the pack. The White Balverine still won't block, so with Whisper being public enemy number 1, this allows me to pick them off with ease when they aren't being backed up by their posse. Round 4 is the Hollow Men, or just the Undead in this game. Very brittle, and their slow movements make it incredibly simple to avoid them. Normally, the difficulty comes from the fact that they never stop spawning. That is obviously not the case in the arena, so they kind of lack their only real advantage. The bigger ones naturally take a little bit longer, but once again, max proved to be stupidly viable. Round 5 is bandits, already killed enough of them to know that they're not worth going over. The assassin ones that appear in the last 2 waves, yes, can be a little bit annoying because they recover fast enough to break out of your combos, but some well-timed flourishes can help to alleviate some of that pain. Rounds 6 and 7 are earth and rock trolls respectively, and we already know that just devolves into an overly aggressive game of volleyball. The rock trolls were slightly more annoying due to the fact that Whisper's AI is atrocious at times and just kept walking into the nearby traps. This meant she couldn't take aggro, resulting in me getting blindsided by boulders one too many times. Final round, and it's Archaeologist, which I mistakenly referred to as Scorpionox last time, which I think would be 100% more terrifying. It's a 10-minute back and forth ordeal, not painfully difficult, just step out of the way when it charges, and then wail on him when he's charging up his attack where he impales the earth. Although, sometimes I couldn't help myself. When the oversized scorpion bites the dust, all that leaves is Whisper. She is no different than her fight in Orchard Farm, except now she has firebombs and occasionally uses the Assassin's Rush spell. They mean nothing in terms of survivability, unfortunately for her. Now, I had planned to leave her alive, as why would I want to make the fight last longer, especially seeing how I'd already been in the arena for an hour at this stage. But that whole ordeal with the rock troll legitimately annoyed me so much that I changed my mind. For a character who I was planning to be good, this was the turning point that was going to send him down a dark path. With my blood money, I purchased more of the Aeon set, and then prepare myself for the biggest hurdle of the run. It was time to rescue the Archaeologist, and oh boy, where do I begin? First off, we now have to contend with Jack's minions. Let's not beat around the bush, they are the absolute worst. They have a lot of health, can inflict good damage, always seem to come in groups of close quarters and ranged fighters, and they can seemingly just flip 180 degrees in the blink of an eye to interrupt my attacks. In other words, this is where I really began to rely on stuff like the slow time spell, although that alone would not be enough. See, everything up to this point has been just a test of willpower, by which I mean patience and not actual magical energy, but that all changes with this quest. Fighting through the first couple of areas isn't that bad of an experience. Sure, if you stop to kill everything like I do, it may take a while, but that is my choice at this point, as I wanted experience. It's when we get to the docks that the situation becomes dire. See, not only do we have to take out a big group of them, bigger than any we've seen so far, but we also need to do so in 5 minutes or else the quest fails. Gonna come out and say it, with my current setup, this is an impossible task. At most, I was able to kill maybe 5 of them before the timer ran out, resulting in my first field quest ever. This kills me inside more than you will ever know. Now, I have seen videos of people using the slow time spell here, and it also slows down the countdown. I don't know if the slowing down the timer is a glitch or if my game glitched by not having it work, but either way, that was not the case for me, so that 5-minute time limit was going to be there regardless. Many of you may also know that there's a speedrun trick here where if you manage to make it down to the Archaeologist, preferably with the slow time spell active, you can take out the 2 guards next to him, and assuming all the other minions are far enough away, the game seemingly won't register them and the quest will complete. So I gave it a shot, and while I was able to take down one of them before the rest appeared, I simply did not output enough damage to deal with them both before the conga line of death descended upon me. After a few more failed attempts, it was time to load back and rethink my strategy. This was where watching the speedrun came in very handy. In the video, the runner, KJ Freshly, used the multi-strike to make very short work of the minions, so clearly that was my ticket to success. I had to go and grind for a little, something I have never had to do in Fable, just so that I had enough experience to get a few levels of multi-strike to see if this would work. I also made sure the guards survived this time around so they could hopefully keep the minions leading down to the docks busy while I ran on by. Sometimes it can be crazy how one simple change in strategy can completely alter the outcome of a situation, and that was exactly what happened here. The multi-striking stick was just deadly enough to take out the 2 magic minions, and thanks to the slow time spell still being active, the others weren't able to get close enough to be considered, and as a result, I was able to finally save the Archaeologist. You would think this kind of difficulty might persist from this point on, but that is so unbelievably far from the truth. We have to head to Litchfield Graveyard now to help the Whispering Skeleton retrieve his armor and weapons. Remember what I said about the undead's greatest strength being the fact they never stop respawning? Well, that's evident here as they keep hounding you until you retrieve the last of Nostro's gear. Thing is though, since we know they don't stop coming, there is absolutely no reason for me to stop and fight them. Meaning I just casually ignore them and steal, dig and fish up the gear we need to proceed. The next area is a little different as it requires us to actually engage with the Walking Dead, or at the very least, this mini-boss at the end. Small boss or not, that does not make him immune to some of our old reliable techniques, and other than getting interrupted a few times by his backup, I don't have many problems with this encounter. All that leaves is the Circle of the Dead. It's a neat gimmick, having to fill the circle with souls of the dead to get past, but it's mostly just the weaker undead soldiers you have to contend with, and seeing how I was washing them earlier at the arena, without most of my magic upgrades mind you, in comparison, this encounter is a joke. Sorry if it seems like I'm flying through almost all of this post-Archaeologist, but truly that was the most difficult part so far. All of this is so much easier by comparison. Like, even in a normal playthrough, it's like the difficulty suddenly switched, considering how much easier the undead are to deal with when compared to fighting a whole swarm of Jack's minions. This breakneck pace keeps up in the next section, as it's Bargate Prison. The entire captured segment plays out as normal, with the race and...
Come later, then we'll have a bit of fun.
Did that guard just f***ing piss on me? As I was saying, race and key retrieval plays out the same way, and once it's time to rescue your mother, I just flip the lever and ignore all of the guards. Not even for my own sake, I was honestly more worried about them injuring or outright killing Scarlet before the fight with the Kraken. I actually managed to even get all of the prisoners out to this point. Unfortunately though, they were all wiped out in a single swing, so not so lucky for them. On the bright side, I was worried for nothing, as it turns out Mother Dearest is barely fazed by the Kraken's tentacles. I honestly thought this was going to be a run-ending segment. Like, I knew I could hit the Kraken's tentacles after he does the slam attacks, but they don't drain his health, rather they just open up the ability to attack his head and do direct damage. I just assumed that since he's so far away, that naturally I wouldn't be able to get past without resorting to ranged combat. Turns out, even I can learn something new about one of my favourite games, as it just so happens that the Kraken will get close enough that you can just about hit him with the stick. I'm sure it looks better with any other melee weapon, but with the stick, it looks like I'm just about hitting his chin. Regardless, this means the fight is doable, and much like the rest of the boss fights, bar the Wasp Queen, it's more of an endurance test than anything else. The only attack I had to watch out for was his mouth laser, as it could knock out most of my health bar in a single go. God knows how long this fight was going to take without slow time and multi-strike, as both of them allow me to get in as much damage as possible before he retreats to the center of the water, and then you have to repeat the tentacle slashing cycle all over again. Just over 10 minutes later, I have slayed the Kraken, rescued Mother, and restored even more faith in the run, as overcoming both the Kraken and the Archaeologist meant I had bypassed 2 of 3 scenarios that I was personally certain would end the run. You know, I always forget just how short the original Fable was, because after the prison escape, you only really have 2 more missions before the final boss fight with Jack. Finding a way to Hook Coast so that we can play in the snow when it's back to Darkwood to reactivate an old Cullis Gate, as it is, for whatever reason, the only one linked to the snowy village. Hey, so did you like seeing me steal undead souls to open that door back at Litchfield? Well, do you want to see me do it again? Yeah, it's basically the same thing, only this time you have to kill the undead in quick succession to get by. Not a lot to say about this, other than it may have been an absolute pain if not for multi-strike. I honestly thought the slow time spell was going to be what helped out the most, but it seems I was mistaken. Arriving in Hook Coast, I do some shopping, encounter a magical barrier, return and ask Mum how to get by. She takes part in her favourite pastime of getting kidnapped, again, so instead I ask the Guildmaster to start spouting some nonsense at the door, which miraculously gets us through. That means it is now time for the fight with Maze. Just like before, the worst part about this fight is that he keeps putting up his physical shield spell, and considering my low damage, I sort of just have to wait around until it turns off. I could go up and hit him to make it drain faster, but more often than not that results in him using the Inflame spell, which is a one-shot. However, despite all of his years of experience and magical prowess, even Maze isn't immune to some good old-fashioned cheese strats. Sucks to be him, I suppose. This leads to the really interesting fight, that being Jack of Blades. Well, first we actually have to chase him across Albion, but that's just a jogging simulator as you walk through some old areas that now have an Oakvale filter on them. When the fight begins, Jack is behind yet another barrier. Thankfully this one is dealt with by just killing his minions. Something which isn't really worth talking about, as they are no stronger than they were earlier with the Archaeologist, and this time I thankfully don't have a time limit. Once the last one goes down, it's time for phase 1 of Jack. He can do some good damage with the Sword of Aeons, I won't lie, but seeing how he is just running around like any other enemy, this does mean I can just walk up and hit him. He may block or attempt to zip away, but you see, the real magic of multi-strike is that it's unblockable. This means it helps to speed things along exponentially. But I imagine what you're really here to see is the second phase, and that's where things really get interesting. Once at half, Jack will retreat to the center of the chamber, float into the air, and grow big. He will also summon more minions, but they don't pose an issue. The trouble now is hitting a floating enemy with a melee weapon, one with incredibly short range at that. Now, the trick here is meant to be that you get right up next to him, lock on, and just start swinging. Occasionally, Jack will do specific attacks that when he moves, one of his feet will be slightly lower than normal to the ground, and you'll be able to hit him and do a little tiny bit of damage. This would probably be easier if I had more points into my skills, as then I'd be taller, but you can offset that by activating the Berserk spell, as it also gives you a height increase. Now, while this was the intended way for me to get by this fight, I won't lie, it was seeming like it was going to take forever, because maybe I'm not tall enough, or perhaps just very unlucky, but it was very rare that I ever managed to land a single hit on Jack. Granted, I slogged through the white balverine and the arena as I was willing to put in the time, but then I noticed something very interesting. Despite how little my stick was tickling Jack's toes, I began to realise that his health was seemingly going down a lot faster than it should have been. For a brief moment, I thought that maybe all of this time the Berserk spell had some sort of killing aura around it that I just didn't know about, but that of course was not the case. No, instead it was much simpler. See this energy wave attack he does with the Sword of Aeons? Well, when it makes contact, it explodes and has an AoE. Turns out that AoE is neutral damage, and, as such, it hurts Jack as well, and seeing how I'm standing right underneath him when it explodes, well, you can do the math. I stocked up on health potions before the fight, so while I do still try and attack him with the stick, it became very clear this was how I was going to win the fight. Sure enough, when he brings himself down to a sliver of health, I stand right in front of him one final time, and his last sword wave explodes gloriously in his face, winning me the fight. When it comes to the Sword of Aeons, well, I can't use it, so I just toss it into the void, and with that, we can push on to the final stretch with the lost chapters. First off is the Fireheart puzzle. Very simple, but it is fun. I decided to let my nice guy shine through once more, and just free them this time instead. This leads me to being forced to grab Abo's Tear, the weapon that exists so good players don't feel like they got shafted for throwing away the plot sword. It's back to Hook Coast again, but before I left, I noticed that for one line of dialogue, the Guildmaster had Maze's voice.
You must place the Fireheart in the Hook Coast Lighthouse.
Odd. Back at Hook Coast, we set up the Fireheart and summon a special ship to take us to the DLC, but of course, things rarely go so smoothly, and now we must contend with the Summoners, the new enemy of the DLC. In all honesty, they aren't that bad to fight. The only annoying part is when they begin charging at one of their range blasts, as while doing so, they are coated with lightning, I believe, meaning you hurt yourself if you try to hit them with the stick. It's annoying for sure, but if you stick close enough to them, they tend not to use their range abilities, so you can just pound away until they get on their knees and are ready to blow. This was one of the few times where I had less trouble here than I did in my level 1 run. In that one, I just barely managed to scrape by and take out the last summoner in time, whereas here, I had all of the time in the world to spare. The joys of being able to manipulate time, I suppose. When the last one goes down, we make the trip and have to face another new enemy, that being the Snow Troll. Remember I mentioned trolls were an absolute cakewalk? Yeah, well, the Snow Troll doesn't hurl rocks at you, meaning he does not fall into the same category as his cousins. That said, they are still pretty easy to cheese. All of the trolls have an AoE slam to get the player off of them, so it's as simple as moving in for a few swings, this baits the attack, you roll away, and then run back in for more once the animation is finished. He will sometimes still try to hit you with the ice spikes, but they only knock you down for a few seconds at most, so it's not a huge setback. After this encounter, I just started ignoring most optional fights. Not because I couldn't handle them, but because I didn't really need the experience anymore, plus it was nearly 3 AM and I just wanted to power through the last few quests before bed. Next up is some more grave robbing, only this time we aren't stealing arms and armor, but rather learning the YMCA. I just dig up every single grave the game indicates, as I'm pretty sure 3 of the 4 glyphs can be in any one of them. The final glyph is always in the same area where you need to fight a few of Jack's minions and 2 summoners. The last 2 mandatory ones for the rest of the story, as a matter of fact. Berserk, Multi-Strike, and Slow Time really do turn the stick into a somewhat viable weapon, and if that doesn't tell you just how busted magic is in Fable 1, then I don't know what will. You actually only have to take out the summoners, as once you do, the cutscene will play where you grab the final glyph. So once that's done, I use my pocket teleporter to return to the Oracle, minions be damned. Now it is time for the best part of the DLC, murdering all of your former associates. Okay, yes, I could go and do the good route and spare them, but if you ask me, that's not as fun, and also in the case of the heroine task, it seemed impossible today. First off though is the arena champion, which means I am of course going to get Thunder's soul. You know, I think Thunder has a grand total of 3 moves. a weird spinning jump attack, a basic sword swing, and then that weird spinning lightning thing that just serves to waste your time. I guess his gimmick is that he's supposed to have an incredible defense given his shield, but again, multi-strike goes through blocks, so bye Thunder. Okay, so next was the Heroine Soul, and as I mentioned, I tried to spare Briar Rose by taking Scarlet Soul, as all it requires is for the player to kill some Screamers, an enemy that is so weak that I completely forgot to mention that I fought them earlier during the maze boss fight. The problem was that it's another one of those kill a certain amount of enemies in quick succession to fill up my bar quests. Only this time I was nowhere near strong enough, even with my buffs, to get the meter anywhere close to full. So I simply loaded back and picked on Briar Rose instead. Rose, despite being absolutely full of herself, is probably the easiest hero fight yet. She doesn't really do anything other than aggressively using double team, which is easily dealt with by just slapping around the clones until she's the only one left. It's becoming abundantly clear by this stage, I hope, that normal encounters like these that don't immediately change up the way the character fights tend to go one of two ways. Either they block continuously and I abuse that by breaking through with multi-strikes and flourishes, or they have no defense whatsoever, in which case I just get behind them and stun lock them to death. It works with Briar and it works with the Guildmaster as well. Although to be fair, that's just a fight against some guards who get the all magic buff occasionally. On the bright side, I did get to do this.
Please, let me teleport you to the graveyard. Take Nostro's soul instead. Very well, hero. Do your worst. I am no defenseless old man. I have powers that you can't begin to... You can put that old stick away.
All that leaves is Dragon Jack of Blades, who thankfully is a lot more unique than the last few battles. For one thing, you can't stun lock him, so that already makes him 10 times better than the other hero fights by default. Although this also means he can't be knocked over, and as a result, I can use Berserk to my heart's content without any of the drawbacks. The damage, with everything stacked up, is not even that bad if I'm being honest. Jack gives you plenty of opportunities to hit him, so you can rack up the damage relatively quick. He will fly away and spew fire down on the arena from time to time, as well as bring in some summoners and minions. That said, both of those things mix together like water and oil. This is because, more often than not, Jack will immediately kill his own men before they even get a chance to properly fight me. Hell, the summoner gets the worst of it. He literally spawns in where Jack does his most powerful sweeping breath attack, which tends to one-shot the poor guy. What this means is I get into a very comfortable loop of beating Jack senseless once he lands, and then once he takes to the skies, I can just run around for a bit to let him deal with his own reinforcements, to which point he'll return to his initial position, and then I can start the process over again. He will still attack you while he's here, but his bites, while annoying, aren't worth worrying about too much. So long as you have even a few health potions at the ready, you should be fine. The fight lasts a little over 10 minutes, so it is one of the longer ones to be fair, but he is also the final boss, so I would be a bit annoyed if it didn't take me this long. With a few more well-placed splinters in his nostrils, the fight is won, and as a final insult to Jack, I keep the mask. Now, Jack of Blades will be forced to use a stick for all of eternity. So truly, I get the last laugh, finishing the game, and proving yes, you can indeed beat Fable with the stick. I'll say it one final time, a lot of this run post-Twinblade was a slog, but at the same time, not awful. It brought me the same kind of enjoyment as my level 1 run, hence why I brought it up so much. The Fable series is incredibly simple, it's almost difficult to not become overpowered, so it's nice to strip things back a bit to make things a little bit more challenging and play the games in ways I'd never had before. So yeah, I would recommend if you love the game to give this a try. I will say though, now that I know that Jack can defeat himself in the first fight, I wonder if a pseudo-pacifist run would be possible. Like, can I just use the summon spells to fight 90% of the battles for me? Now, I imagine the Archaeologist rescue mission would prove to be the most difficult part of the run again. Well, that's an idea for another day. Regardless, that's going to be in this challenge video. If you enjoyed what you saw, consider giving the video a like, and you're interested in more challenges in the future, feel free to subscribe. Try to have one of these videos every week. My name is Nerbit, stay safe everyone, I'll see y'all in the next video.